when it's raining like it is right now, when I can hear the thunder and I can see the lightning, every single time, no doubt about it, every single time, no exceptions, I have the exact same thought. And that thought is, my God is powerful. And I've always thought it was so cool that if you want to see the power of God, that you can see it all around you. You can see it in the storm. You can see it in the way the sun comes up in the morning. You can see it all throughout His creation. And I've always thought that that was such a neat thing. I can see the power of my God in His creation. And it's also so cool to me that I can open up the Bible and that I can see the power of my God in the Bible. And as I read and do exactly what we did this morning, and as we examine the text and as we examine a story, we can see the power of God. And we can see how awesome and how great He is. Just some recap this morning, and it's really important to talk about that and to rethink a little bit and to set our minds again on that which we talked about this morning. To recap, Jesus is well on His way to the cross. Several things have happened. He's been betrayed. He's been brought before the council. He's been brought before the Hebrews. He has now stood before Pilate. And Pilate gave the people a choice. He gave the people a choice. He said, you can have Barabbas. He's a thug, a murderer, a crook. He's a bad man. Or you can have Jesus, one who's done nothing but heal, who has restored sight to the blind, who is lame, healed the lame and healed the sick. He's given hearing to the deaf. He's done all of these things. And the people made their choice, and they chose Barabbas. And we talked this morning about how Barabbas, that's us up on that stage. And how we too had a time in our life where we walked off that stage and we also chose ourselves. And as we look back, we can see Jesus going to a cross that really wasn't His. I want to do this one more time, and I want to make sure that you understand. Whose cross is that? It's our cross. This is not Jesus' cross. This was never Jesus' cross. It never will be Jesus' cross. It was always our cross. Because from the very beginning of time, we see in Adam and Eve, on through every generation since then, people have sinned. And we've brought that upon ourselves. That is not Jesus' cross. That is our cross. It's always been our cross. And we talked about how Jesus stood there silently as the very people He came to save are now screaming that He be killed. And they're wanting Barabbas. And can you imagine what's going on? Can you imagine the scene at this time? Can you imagine the utter disbelief and the shock of all the people as Barabbas is the man who is set free, and he walks off the stage a free man. And Jesus walks off the stage a prisoner, going to a cross that is not his to bear. That's what's going on. That's where we're at. And tonight, I should have mentioned it this morning. I'm kicking myself for it. We're going to the immediate aftermath of exactly what happened because of the decision to take Barabbas. Here, and actually we're going to be in Luke chapter 23. You can go there. We could have stayed in Matthew chapter 27 and heard the same story. Again, this is what we have recorded in the text as happening exactly, right after. Right after the scene with Barabbas, we have a scene where Jesus is being asked to carry His cross to the place where He is going to be killed. And Jesus, as you can imagine, He's already been whipped and beaten and disrespected. And Jesus is now being asked not only to go to a cross that's not His to bear. He's being asked to go to our cross. He's also being asked to carry the cross. And we know from Luke chapter 23, starting in verses 26 again, we could have stayed in Matthew 27, but I really wanted to go here in Luke 23. There's a few things that I just like the way it's worded better. Jesus is being asked to carry the cross, and we come across a very interesting character. Remember the story this morning. I said that in the story of Jesus, that so often we skip straight to the cross, and we don't spend near enough time talking about the things that happened leading up to the cross. The narrative has already been interrupted by this man named Barabbas. And here in Luke chapter 23, it's also going to be interrupted again by a man by the name of Simon of Cyrene. Simon. Simon is that man whom we know was put in charge. He was given the task of helping Jesus carry the cross. And as I think about all that we talked about this morning, and as we talked about how we have a choice to make, and we're talking about how we are Barabbas, it seemed only fitting that we go in the immediate aftermath, we just move right along with the story, and we talk about carrying the cross. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, carrying the cross in Luke chapter 23. And as we go through Luke chapter 23, we're going to read verses 26 on through verse 32, but actually, we're really going to spend almost our entire time talking about verse 26. And it's amazing to me how you can look at one passage in the Bible, one verse, and you can make so many different applications, and it can teach us so many things. But we're going to read 26 on through verse 32, and let's go ahead and do that now. Again, this is right after the people have chosen Barabbas. This is what happens next. It says, when they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, coming in from the country, and placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus. And following him was a large crowd of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry? Two others also, who were criminals, were being led away to be put to death with him. And so in this narrative, in our story, the name Simon, he only appears in one verse. One verse talks about a man who plays a pretty significant role, don't you think? A pretty significant role. He is the man given the task of helping Jesus carry our cross, helping Jesus carry our cross to the place where he is to be crucified. So like I said, there's so many different applications that we want to make. First of all, verse 26, the text seems to indicate that we are to be, if we're going to be a people that are ready to take up our cross, ready to carry the cross for Jesus, we have to be willing to change our plans. If you look in verse 26, it says that they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, coming in from the country. So picture this. As they're leaving the city and they're going toward the place where Jesus is going to be killed, and Jesus is carrying our cross, a man named Simon is coming in. He's not involved in this whatsoever. He is a passerby, the other Gospels tell us. He is just one who just so happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He is coming in as they are going out. And he is the man given this task of helping Jesus carry the cross. Now, there's so many significant things about this idea of changing your plans. You know, this man Simon, he had absolutely no idea at the beginning of this day that he would be given the task of carrying the cross. This man was a foreigner. He was here to observe the holiday that is going on. He is not involved in everything that is happening to Jesus. He was a foreigner from Cyrene, which is in northern Africa. It is what we would now consider Libya. That part of the country, so he's a foreigner. Again, he was celebrating a holiday when suddenly he finds himself in a position where he's being asked to do something pretty extraordinary, helping Jesus carry the cross. His plans that day were not to carry the cross. Change of plan. Now he's being asked to do something that he never would have pictured himself doing at the beginning of the day. Carrying the cross is all about changing your plans, if you really think about it. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I had big plans for myself. When I was growing up, I had some really big plans and some really big ideas. When I was a little kid, call me crazy, I know, but I think I'm just like any little kid who plays baseball. I wanted to play professional baseball. I loved baseball, and all my life, people say, what are you going to do when you grow up? I said, I'm going to play in the big leagues. I'm going to be a big leaguer. I want to be a big league baseball player. And that was my aspiration. That's what I wanted to do. That was my life's goal, was to get to the big leagues. And then the older I got, I understood that probably wasn't very likely and that the chances of that happening were slim. And I got other aspirations. I had big dreams, big plans. You know, preaching, I've often told people this: preaching is the very last thing that I ever thought I would be doing. It was the very last thing on my mind. I had big plans. I had big dreams. And the fact that I'm preaching, it just blows my mind. But sometimes when it comes to carrying the cross, it's not about our plans. It's not about our dreams. You know, as I was sitting there and I was thinking about what I wanted to be, and it come time for me to make a decision. Do you want to preach or do you want to go do something else? And this actually, even though I worked here in part-time in high school, even going into college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was asking all the wrong questions. I still had all these big dreams and all these big plans for myself and for my life and my future family. I had big plans, and now I was wrestling with this decision. What do I do? What do I do? And as I'm making all these plans and I'm thinking about what I wanted to do, one day it happened to me. I realized something. And maybe you can relate to this. I realized that Jesus was excluded from the conversation. I realized that as I'm making my plans and I'm thinking about my dreams, the problem was Jesus wasn't included in my plans. And now I want you to understand, I'm not saying it's wrong to have dreams and plans and aspirations. I'm not saying it's wrong to have any of those things. But what I'm saying is, where is Jesus in the conversation? Often people come to me and they're talking about the possibility of moving someplace. And often I say, well, why are you moving? And they say something like this. They say, well, a job opportunity opened up for me in some town far away, whatever. Maybe it's not that far away. And they said, I'd be crazy if I passed it up. Well, what about the school? Well, the school's great. Oh, man, the school is great. My kids are going to have a great time. They have a very, very good education program there. They have good sports teams. It's a great school. It's a great community. It's located in a beautiful part of the country. It's a great place to go. And they have all these plans. And they've got it all thought out as to what they're going to do. But there's one problem. Can you guess what the problem is? Jesus is nowhere in the conversation. I say, well, how about the congregation, the church situation in that town? You know what they often say? Really, I have no idea. I really have no idea. I think there's a church in that town. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that there is. Or even if they say, yeah, there's a church there, and I'm sure we'll just become members of the congregation. Do you see the problem with that like I do? Jesus is the very, very last thing that they're thinking of in making this decision. Maybe the church there in that town is a disaster. I don't know. Maybe there's no real opportunity for their children to be raised in the faith the way that they're supposed to be. Do you see a problem with that the way that I do? We make all these plans and we have all these dreams, and often we cast Jesus aside and he's not in our plans at all. And what happens when we come to that realization? What happens is we have to come to the conclusion, the honest conclusion, that we've got to stop making life about us and start making life about him. And maybe you know of somebody who has. I don't know. But I really don't know that I've ever seen a person who is thinking about moving somewhere and they decide not to because the church situation isn't very good there in that town. I don't know that I've ever seen that. Maybe you have, and I'm sure that there are some exceptions to that. But I personally have never seen a person debating and thinking about this type of big decision in their life, and they don't do it, and that's the reason they don't do it, because they know the church situation isn't that great. Typically, that's the last thing that we think about. But when it comes to being a Christian, a disciple who carries the cross of Jesus, it's about putting our plans aside. It's about thinking of Jesus. It's about seeking first the kingdom, right? Matthew 6:33, seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added to you. That's what a cross-carrying disciple does. There's another application here that's in the text, and it's called bearing a burden. That idea is also here. The fact that they placed on this man the cross to carry behind Jesus. The application is this: being a disciple is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. We quote that passage so often that Jesus said that my burden is easy, but my yoke is light. It's still a yoke. It's a grind. Being a disciple is not going to be easy. Jesus never promised you that being a disciple was going to be easy, because it's not. That's why Jesus said that you have to count the cost of being a disciple, because it costs you something. In fact, it costs you everything. It's not going to be easy. Is it rewarding? It's the most rewarding lifestyle that there is. Are you going to be happy? It's the happiest thing, the happiest occasion that you could ever imagine when a person starts living a life for Jesus. But is it going to be easy? Day in, day out, the cost of discipleship, is it easy? No, it's not easy. It's really, really hard. I mean, think about it. Jesus, the idea of carrying Jesus' cross, the cross was never meant to be pleasant. It was a torture device. Can you imagine having the task of physically, and we're talking right now about, obviously in a spiritual sense, a metaphorical sense, but can you imagine actually having the task of physically carrying the cross? It is believed by most historians that the cross in total probably weighed about 300 pounds, somewhere in the 300 pounds range. Now that was the whole cross. There were also the cross beams of the cross, which would have weighed probably somewhere in the 80 to 125 pound range. And there's actually some argument among historians as to whether the people of the time were supposed to carry, whether they were made to carry the whole cross or just the beam, the cross beam of the cross. But I think that's beside the point, don't you? Just picture what Jesus has already been what he's already been through up to this point. He's already been beaten, scourged, all of those things, and now he's being charged with the task of carrying the cross. And not only was the cross pretty heavy, but it's believed that it was probably somewhere in the 600 to 700 yards range that Jesus would have had to carry his cross uphill to where he was going to be crucified. Now, I don't care how good a physical condition you are in, okay? Picture this. Picture a 90-pound bag of concrete, and you throw it up on your back, and you have to walk 600 or 700 yards uphill. It'd be pretty tough, would it not? Especially after you'd already been beaten nearly to death. And Jesus was to carry his cross. And this man, Simon of Cyrene, a man who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, is now being called to bear this burden. Something else I want you to notice there in verse 26 that I find so interesting. It says at the latter portion of the passage, it says, and they placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus. It's not that he went and picked it up, they placed it on him. Did you know that there are going to be times when a burden is placed on you? Meaning you didn't go looking for it. You didn't plan on it. It didn't appear to be something you would have to worry about. Sometimes it comes in the form of a person. Sometimes they place things on you that they shouldn't. That's just the nature of people. And sometimes it's going to be placed on you by none other than Jesus himself. There are burdens that are going to be placed on you, just as there are burdens that are placed on this man, Simon of Cyrene. There are times where burdens are going to be placed upon us. So the question really is, are you all the way in or are you out? Are you all the way in? Are you all in for Jesus? 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm a LeBron James fan, by the way. I understand his politics are insane. I get sick of listening to him talking about all these current problems, but my whole life he was my favorite basketball player. 2016 he was playing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they won the NBA title. And every year they have a saying, each NBA team in the playoffs, and that year, I'll never forget it, the Cleveland Cavaliers saying was all in. Was all in, and I'll never, ever forget that. When it comes to being a disciple, a cross-carrying disciple, I'm going to ask the question, are you all the way in? Because if you're not all the way in, then you're out. That's how this works. Are you all the way in, or are you out? Is it going to be easy being a disciple? No, it's not. That's why it's so important that we count the cost. It'll cost you everything. It's about giving up your life, following Jesus. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. But someone tell me, people, is it going to be worth it? Absolutely, it's going to be worth it, right? One day when you get to stand in the presence of God in heaven and you get to be with those people whom you love and we get to worship God forever and be together forever in this beautiful place called heaven, will it be worth it? You bet it'll be worth it. Being a disciple is hard. It's a task. At times it's a burden. Burdens being placed on you. It's not easy. When I was thinking about going into ministry, actually I was 17 years old, and I can remember being 17 years old, and I can remember Curtis and I. And it's so crazy. I can remember that I would call Curtis sometimes throughout the week, even before I got here. And I would say, man, I really am thinking about this preaching thing. I really think that I could do this. And I'll never forget the advice that he gave me. He said, if there's nothing else for you, preach. If this is the only thing you feel you can do, preach. And I shook my head at that. I was like, what do you mean? It's like he's trying to talk me out of it. No, what he was saying was this. If you're not all the way in, and if you're not convicted to the point where that's the only thing, the only option for you, you will not make it. That's what he was saying. And he's absolutely right. And I've gotten that advice from other people, by the way. And when it comes to being a disciple, if we're not all the way in, we won't make it. I think we could play witness to that just from the last year and a half, don't you think? There are some people who before this I thought to be very, very strong, and Satan has just worked on them. And I'm not saying that these people were in the wrong for doing what they did. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is Satan just worked on them and worked on them and worked on them, and finally got through to the point that their faith is not where it was. Satan is powerful, and we need to understand that if we're a Christian, we're all in or we're all out. It's one or the other. There's another application here in the text that we want to talk about. It's this idea that we don't get to choose when we carry the cross. I'm sure that Simon would have much rather not carried the cross that day. I'm sure he would have hated for it for a lot of reasons, but especially because it was a huge inconvenience. He was on his way to do something else, but here's the application is sometimes Jesus is going to require something of us. Sometimes something's going to come up at a very inconvenient time for us. Being a Christian is not convenient, by the way. Sharing our faith is not convenient. Being the kind of brother whom is doing the right thing is not convenient. Being a Christian is not always going to be convenient for you, for myself as well. But we don't get to choose when we carry the cross. Carrying the cross is a personal decision that you have to make every single day when you wake up. And as you think about this idea of being done pretending, because I don't know if you're in the same boat as I am, I'm done pretending. I'm done playing church. I'm ready to be the church. I'm ready to be the change. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of playing. I'm tired of making this just another thing that I do. I'm ready to make this who I am at my core. I'm ready to make this not a part of my life, but all of my life, all the time. And when you do that, you have to decide every single day to seek first the kingdom. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is it that's going to motivate you? What drives you? What gets you going? What fires you up? Maybe it's something like the story that we read together this morning. What fires you up? What keeps you going? For all you ranchers out there, what cranks your tractor? What is it that motivates you? What gets you going in the right direction? Whatever that is, whatever it is that motivates you, that drives you, whatever it is, remember it, don't ever forget it, and cling to it. Because every single day is not going to be easy being a disciple. Cling to that which motivates you, and let it continue to drive you to the point where this is who you are. 24/7, all the time. There's another application here also, fourthly, in the text, and that is the idea of being willing to be led. In verse 26 again, and the reason I chose Luke's account is for this reason right here. You notice it says that it placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus. The other Gospels don't mention this. They don't word it that way. Luke says that he was to carry the cross behind Jesus. In other words, Jesus was still in the driver's seat. I talk about lordship a lot. You've probably noticed that. I talk about lordship all the time, but I want you to know that there's a reason for it. It's because I honestly believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I think it's one of the most amazingly designed things that God ever did. I think God's design of lordship is fantastic. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And it's so important that as we're thinking of what it is to be a cross-carrying disciple, that just like Simon was placed behind Jesus, we place ourselves behind Jesus as well. Well, what does that mean? That means that what he wants comes first. That means it's not about me anymore. Did you know that the moment that you became a Christian, it stopped being about you? It stopped being about me. It stopped being you who was in the driver's seat of your life. My goodness, this last weekend we were, some of the youth and I, of course, we were driving through Dallas. And, man, some of that Dallas traffic, you know how it is. And I'm in a church van loaded down with all these kids. Believe me, there was plenty of times when I was really wishing somebody else was in the driver's seat. I hated it. Golly, it was horrible driving that van through Dallas. But let me tell you something. When it comes to Jesus being in the driver's seat, it's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week thing. Where is Jesus, as we mentioned earlier, in your plans? Where is Jesus every day? Is he leading you? Is he really the Lord? You've heard me say this before too. Everyone wants a Savior. Okay, everyone wants a Savior. In here, raise your hand if you want your sins to be forgiven. Right here. Yeah, all of us, right? We all want our sins to be forgiven. Now, if I were to ask, and I'm not going to, but if I were to ask now, how many of you are willing to give up your life? How many of you are willing to say, it's not about me and what I want and what I plan and what I dream. It's about living a life for him. The answer would change for some people. Are you willing to give up whatever it is? And I'm not saying that you have to give everything up and, your hobbies, your job. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you're not in the driver's seat anymore. Being a disciple is about not always getting your way. When I was a kid that loved when somebody would dare me to do something. Am I the only one? I loved it when somebody would dare me to do something because I was stupid enough to do it, and they thought it was funny, and I liked it when they laughed at something stupid that I did. Maybe you're like me. I thought it was hilarious. It was like, Chase, I dare you to do this, or I dare you to do that. 9 times out of 10, no matter how stupid it was, I would do it. Maybe you're like me. But equally as much as that, I loved it when I would dare someone to do something and they would do it. See, when you were a kid, when someone said, I dare you to do something, that means they really, really, really wanted you to do it, and they wanted to see you do it. Most of the time because they knew you would probably get hurt, and they wanted to laugh at your pain. That was me, by the way. They would laugh at my pain, and I'd get so mad. Like, man, what are you laughing at? Laughing at me getting hurt. I wanted them to laugh when I wasn't hurt. They'd laugh at me when I got hurt. And I would laugh at somebody else when they got hurt, when I dared them to do something. And like I said, when you think about what it is to dare, how many of you ever played Truth or Dare as a kid? I know I did. You say play Truth or Dare, and often I always picked Dare because I didn't want to tell them the truth. I always picked Dare. But like I said, when you dared someone to do something, that meant you really, really, really wanted to see them do it. I dare you. Oh, I'm going to take this a step further. I triple dog dare you. Did you ever hear that? I triple dog dare you to put Jesus in the driver's seat and watch what happens. I triple dog dare you. Let him in the driver's seat. Let him make the decisions. Is that a scary thought? For some of us, yeah, it is, because we don't know what that's like when we're not in control. It's a scary thing to some of us. I triple dog dare you to let him be in the driver's seat and watch what he does with your life. Watch how things start to come together. Watch how things just work out. I dare you to let Jesus call the shots and see what happens. In order to be a disciple, we have to be willing to submit, to place ourselves under Jesus and his rule, his command. The last application we want to make before we close out is this. The text also seems to indicate that it is not optional. I'm sure for Simon of Cyrene, it wasn't optional. They were going to make him carry the cross. And as we're talking about carrying the cross, maybe this whole sermon you've been thinking about that passage that we find over in Luke chapter 14 and verse 27, when Jesus says, whoever does not carry his own cross cannot be my disciple. Maybe you've been thinking about that passage this whole sermon. I got there. Whoever does not carry his own cross cannot be my disciple. It is not optional. It is not optional. How badly do you want to be a disciple? How much does your relationship with Jesus mean to you? Does something else mean more to you than that? If you want a relationship with Jesus, it's time to stop pretending. It's time to stop playing church. It's time to start being the church. Being a cross-carrying disciple, it's not optional. That burden, that inconvenience, it's not optional. Jesus, again, he said, if you want to be my disciple, you have to carry the cross. You know, one thing I haven't done, and maybe you've picked up on this, I really haven't talked specifically about what Jesus meant when he said to carry the cross. Well, think about the cross for just a second. And again, I think it loses its meaning sometimes. Like I said earlier, I know that I used to wear a necklace around my neck that had a cross on it. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to do so if it's a reminder. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I think sometimes we're guilty of letting the cross lose its meaning when we see a cross, because they're everywhere we look. In Jesus' day, no one would have wore a cross around their neck. I'm going to put it that way. No one would have wore a cross around their neck. Because in Jesus' day, the cross was a symbol. It was a symbol of torture. It was a symbol of pain and agony. The word excruciating, you've heard that word before. The word excruciating is the word actually that we get from the Roman crucifixion. That's where the word comes from the cross, from crucifixion. It meant pain, it meant torture, it meant suffering. But first and foremost, the cross was a symbol of death. It meant death. When you saw a cross, it meant and symbolized death. So when Jesus says in Luke chapter 14, whoever does not take up his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple, what did he mean? We know that it's not optional, but what does it mean? Death is involved, by the way. It hasn't lost its meaning to us today. It still involves death. Well, Chase, what do you mean? Who's going to die? You talking about Jesus dying? No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's a part of it. But when Jesus said to carry your cross, what he meant was, you too have to die to self. It means that you put yourself aside. It means putting to death all of our own pleasures and desires and temptations, sin. All of that has to be cast aside. By the way, would you agree with me that sin is appealing? It's appealing, is it not? If sin wasn't appealing, it would not be an issue. Sin is appealing. It's something that naturally we want to do. If it wasn't appealing, Eve wouldn't have eaten the fruit. But as she looked at it and she saw, the text tells us there in the book of Genesis, it was a delight to the eyes. She ate and gave also to her husband. So what does it mean to carry your cross? It means to die to self. It means you're in a car and you pull over, you kick yourself out of the driver's seat, you let Jesus take you home. It means it's not about us anymore. Let's end on this thought. As we're bringing in all that we've talked about today, and we've talked about a lot, by the way. We've talked about two characters that so often we don't talk about. We've talked about Barabbas, and we've talked about how we are Barabbas. We're that person who deserved the cross, and Jesus took the burden away from us. We are Barabbas. But the question I now present to you is, are you Simon? Are you ready? Are you geared up? Are you fired up? Are you ready to carry the cross this week? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Being a disciple isn't easy, but are you ready to carry the cross? I hope that you are. And as we offer up a song of invitation, we do this every time we get together. And I'm afraid that sometimes we forget what kind of opportunity this is for you. Maybe you're convicted to the point you're ready to become a Christian. We can help you with that. We can take care of that. That's always available. Jesus is always ready. He's waiting for you. Maybe you're already a Christian. Maybe you're struggling with something. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. James chapter 5 tells us to confess our sins to one another. Is that a hard thing to do? Yeah, it's a really hard thing to do. Because you're scared of disappointing somebody. You're scared of somebody looking at you differently. I want you to know that we're not going to do that here. We can talk about it. We can put it out there. We can pray for you. We can help you. But we can't do that unless you tell us how we can help you. If you're in need of anything at all, please come as we stand and as we sing.